Welcome back to the Video Strategy Podcast, where we share our lived experiences and lessons from in the field so you can grow your video business in a reliable and meaningful way while attracting the right clients and charging what you deserve. So I'm here with Will Dorian Smith again, and today we're going to be talking about the sales process. And this is sales in terms of how we are able to close video clients over the years, the lessons that we've learnt, and specifically moving from charging day rates around £500 to £5,000 initially, now up to £50,000 to £100,000 projects. There have been a lot of things that we've learnt over the years, and so just picking the most interesting, most relevant pieces and to help you guys has been tricky, but I think we boiled it down to the things that have made the biggest shifts for us. So, Will, before we kick it off, what for you has been the overall mindset shift over the last few years to enable you to get to where you are now?
Yeah, really excited to talk about this because this has probably been the number one thing that has changed my year, changed my business, tripled my income, absolutely changed everything. And it's a very simple shift. And it's simply, again, going from supplier, what's your budget, what do you want, to partner, what's your biggest challenge? Let's see if I can help you with that. Which again means that you can charge more money, have better projects, and most importantly, get better results for your client. Really having a win-win mentality that gives you more case studies. That means you get to better clients. So yeah, absolutely life-changing. So number one for me, again, is getting on their side of the table, making sure that you're helping them achieve the goal. You're not just trying to land a client to get paid. You're trying to help this amazing person achieve this incredible thing.
Yeah. And I think at the core of all of this is that most people are afraid of being salesy because they've been sold to so many times. And no one wants to come across as the car salesman. No one wants to come across as pushy. And especially in this space, we're all creatives. And ultimately, deep down, we want the work to speak for itself and to never have to do any sales at all. But the reality is that even with the best work in the world, you still have to promote yourself. You still have to have a fundamental understanding of marketing and sales. And while there are people out there who just rely entirely on referrals and word of mouth, and they never push themselves, they almost always get to the same place, which is where they hit a plateau and they realize that now they're dependent on just a small handful of clients, and now it's time to scale up. So oftentimes I'm speaking to people where they're very creatively and technically talented, but it's that sales component, it's the marketing component that's missing. And the most important message I want to get across today is that it doesn't need to be all that hard, and it doesn't need to be salesy, most importantly. I think the approach that we've taken over the years has really been about, first and foremost, helping people, like you're just saying, Will. That's at the core of all of it. This is about making a positive impact in people's lives and just been about being able to communicate the value of what you're offering. That's the most important thing here. And at the end of the day, this isn't about pushing and telling and selling. It's ultimately just about asking the right questions to help the prospect come to their own realization of what action they need to take to solve that problem. And by going through that process, you naturally position yourself as an expert. And then by the end of a great sales call or strategy call, you naturally come to the conclusion where the prospect is asking you, or Jackson or Will, how do I solve this problem? That's where you want to get to by the end of the conversation. And then that naturally bridges into the solution. So one of the first things, one of the most important pieces of all of this is making that shift away from talking about the deliverables and the solutions in the first conversation. Will, perhaps you can speak to this because, when you're talking about deliverables and solutions in the first conversation, what tends to happen?
They say, that's not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're in a position, you're on the back foot. you're positioning yourself essentially that I'm going to come up with lots of ideas that I hope they like, without really understanding what the problem is. And you put them in a massive position of power to essentially just say, no, yeah, don't like that, don't like that. And all of us have had experiences with clients when we sit back and we say, why is this person making creative decisions? Are they really in a position to make these decisions? And often you could create a video that ends up not working for them, not working for you, and they don't work for you. You don't work together again.
Exactly. It puts you in that vendor position. And in our last episode, we were talking about the importance of the conversation being the proposal and positioning yourself as a strategist. So, specifically when it comes to the sales process or the strategic conversation, however you want to call it, the first most important fundamental piece of all of this is to apply the doctor frame. So rather than coming in just like Will was talking about, you're getting positioned as a vendor by answering a brief, and you essentially become a subordinate. You want to go in as a doctor would. And that means asking questions, and it means holding a very specific type of frame. So let's just have two different scenarios here. One is prospect comes in, he says, hey, Will, here's the brief. This is what I need made. The most natural tendency for most people is to say, okay, here are the ideas I've got. This is what we can do for you. On the other side of the spectrum, as a strategic partner, what you need to do is say, okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I love the fact that you've got a brief, but just before we dive into that, I'd love to take a step back and first just take a broader look at your business and your goals and check that we're in alignment here. Does that all sound good to you? Great. So with that said, what's the biggest challenge in your business right now? That's the sort of reframe that we aim to do at the beginning of a call, whether someone's coming to you as the expert or whether someone's coming to you as a vendor just looking for a video to be made. Either way, whatever happens, you apply the same frame, and that's the doctor frame. So you can draw this analogy throughout the sales process, because at the end of the day, if you go into a doctor's office, the absolute worst thing a doctor could do is firstly just prescribe something straight away. So you go into a doctor's office and they said, hey, well, you need this subscription here. I'm going to prescribe you such and such. You would immediately lose trust with them. So that's the very last thing we want to do. We don't want to prescribe too quickly. So the rule of thumb that I apply is that the first call, the first conversation, typically the first hour, you do not talk about solutions or deliverables at all. And again, that might feel very counterintuitive, and sure, it feels weird to begin with, but that is the first biggest step to putting you into a place of power. Now, the other piece, what does a doctor do? They don't sit there and tell and sell and go on long rants. They simply ask questions. So the other rule of thumb here is we want to be aiming for a 20-80. So 20% of the time you're asking questions, 80% of the time they're speaking and they're answering. Because really, what are we doing in that first conversation? We're just gathering information to put ourselves in a better position of power so that we've got more leverage, we've got something to work with. Because otherwise we're just shooting in the dark. And the way I look at the discovery process is that we're filling in the blanks. So imagine you go into a room and there are 100 boxes with question marks on them. Each question mark is an unknown that could mean you deliver the wrong solution, or it means that there's an objection there that could come up that could kill the deal later on. And all we're doing as we're going through the discovery process is opening each of those drawers, building up a big picture of exactly what's going on. And by the time we get to the end of the conversation, every one of those drawers should be opened. There should be no question marks left in an ideal world. And then the solution very naturally presents itself, and the prospect's in a place where the inevitable and obvious next step is to work with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. And the doctor frame, time and time again, is incredibly useful. Anytime you're feeling funny on a call, anytime you're not sure about what you're doing, anytime you get a question out of left field, just coming back to that doctor frame, realizing how ridiculous it would be if you walked into a doctor and they immediately sold you drugs without knowing what's wrong with you. I mean, it's really, really odd. Another great analogy I like to think of is, maybe you start talking to this person, but they don't want to talk about their problems. And the analogy I think of is like, well, how can a doctor help? If I walk into a doctor's office and I've got one leg and I say, okay, I need prescription for a headache, the doctor will say, well, should we talk about the leg? The guy's like, oh, well, I hopped here, I'm fine. It's like, no. Let's talk about the leg. We can help you with that. So really the doctor frame positions you as an expert, as somebody who can help. And at the end of the day, the better results you get your client, the more they will continue to trust you and hire you.
Yeah, just to spell it out with the doctor frame, the headache is the brief or the idea that they're coming to you with. And they're sat there with they're missing their leg and they're trying to talk about the headache, the brief, when actually deep down in the business, there is something that is burning a hole in their pocket. There is some much bigger problem there that needs to be addressed. Cool.
Exactly. And without fully diagnosing the problem, you cannot help them. No matter how great your creative is, no matter how great your skills are, if you don't know the true challenge, how are you actually going to create anything that's genuinely useful to them?
Yeah. So building on the doctor frame, the next key piece is the Socratic approach, which I've already hinted at already, which is that rather than telling and selling, we should be asking questions. When we ask questions, it puts us in a position of power. We're not there as the vendor to take orders. We're there to gather as much information as we can. Now, the best response that we get from people after going through the Socratic approach is that you'll hear prospects say, I didn't expect this at all. I love the questions that you were asking. Like, I got so much clarity from this conversation. And a lot of the time as well, you'll hear prospects essentially say, you understand my business better than anyone else that I've spoken to. And the interesting thing is that you haven't been there telling them about their business. You've simply sat there and you've asked them the right questions. So the Socratic approach is the most important fundamental principle to running a good sales meeting, built on the doctor frame.
And Jackson, for you, how does this compare to what you used to do? Could you tell me a little story about, what you used to do and how that worked out for you versus what you do now and how much better that is?
Absolutely. So the starting point when you're going to any conversation and you're just starting out in the business, or even a few years into my business, it was always, what's your budget? That was probably the main question that I asked. But the rest of the time, I was just sharing ideas. I just wanted to know, okay, what's your budget? And then here are the ideas that I've got. And I had a number of clients that I worked with back in the day, and it would sometimes lead to like okay engagements where at the end of the day, we delivered a relatively good product, but there was always that feeling that we could have done more. There was always that feeling of, well, we didn't fully get them the kind of results that they wanted. And for me, that was the most frustrating piece, because you go through an entire production, you deliver them whatever it is that they ask for, and then they're like, okay, cool. And you see a video sat on YouTube with like 100 views. Or sometimes you see they don't even use the video. It's not on their website. It's not on their homepage. You're like, well, what are they doing with this? And what I realized over time is that the client isn't the expert when it comes to video. Although they might come to you with what seems like a clear idea of what they want, the reality is that's not their area of expertise. So we have to ask the right questions to get to a point where we fully understand the situation. And going through that, they'll also realize too that their original ideas, their original briefs are probably not what are needed to get the kind of outcomes that are most important to them. So in contrast to today, even just yesterday, I had a sales call with a financial advisor. The difference is night and day. So I lead by setting the frame. establishing why we're here and the purpose of this call. And then I go in with the first and most important question, asking what's the biggest challenge in their business right now. And then I shut up and listen. And then by the end of the call, after about 45, 50-minute conversation, I had everything that I needed to then go away and then come up with a solution. So that's my process now. It's the first call is shut up and listen. The second call is where I do the talking, where I present the ideas.
And how has that changed the quality of your projects, the quality of your deliverables, the solutions you're able to create for people, the impact you're able to make? How has that change of strategy shifted all of that?
Yeah. Well, it's huge. So first and foremost, over time, by going through this process, I've realized that often it's not just video that is needed to get the kind of results that they want. And a big transformation for my business has been, first off, the only thing I would do would be shoot and edit and deliver video. Now, over the last 10 years, I'm now in a place where there are a number of other services and pieces of the puzzle that I love to offer alongside video because I know it's going to get them better and better results. So there are plenty of situations where you can still just offer video if that's what you want to do. But the key is you want to unlock the big picture. So let's say someone has a issue with conversions. So after doing a bit of digging, you find out that their website isn't converting at the rate that it should do, and that's costing them tens of thousands of dollars per month. So through finding that out, the ideal solution might involve video, might involve new website, and might involve some design elements as well. Now, that then puts you in a position of power where, first and foremost, had you not found this out, you would have just gone and created a video and it would have sat dormant on YouTube or on their website and wouldn't have got them any results anyway. So you don't want that. But it puts you in a position where you can either recommend to the client, these are the other things that you need to do if you really want to get results with this. Or option two, you can outsource these things. You can find valuable partners, people that you work with who can help you when it comes to design, websites, all of those pieces. Or the third piece is that you can do it in-house and you can start to build up a team. And because you're able to charge more and because you've got a strong niche and your sales process and your pricing is good, because you're able to charge more, you're then able to hire really good people who can help you solve these problems. So those are your three options. You don't have to detach from video. That's always the center of the solution. But you start to realize that there are other pieces of the puzzle that are important when it comes to actually getting results.
Right. And this is where the questions are just incredibly valuable. And another benefit that I've noticed is that you almost become a business coach, because often these business owners are very busy and maybe they haven't really thought about what their biggest challenge is. Or if they think they know what their biggest challenge is, then you can dive deeper into that. You can spend, 45 minutes, an hour essentially doing business coaching, really understanding what the problem is, really understanding what the solution could look like, or at least what the results that they're looking for, and help them gain clarity on how to get there within the next year. So you become this incredibly powerful coach position, again, rather than being a supplier. And I'd like to quickly highlight just a recent case study where this has worked incredibly well for me. There was a local bakery that I work with who they were going to open up in 3 or 4 months, and they really wanted to make an impact on day one. They wanted to have local people there on day one. Because of that, we created a social media campaign of the build. So for months and months, the local people in the area saw this bakery coming to life. First the oven goes in and then the walls change and then the sign goes up and the sign gets painted. And so by the time the doors opened, they had a line around the block on day one for a completely new business, no other outreach, purely just social media campaign. Because we understood their number one challenge, getting customers on day one, we were able to put a strategy in place that guaranteed that outcome. If they said, hey, we need a website video, and just made them a website video, what do you think the result would be? not that
Exactly.
great. So it's just, and it's so exciting going through this process with your client. And again, you're deepening your relationship with them. You're really understanding their core challenges. Um, and you're there as a partner and to help them along their journey. And it's just so much more satisfying than being like, okay, cool, I can deliver a thing for you. That's fine. Move on.
Yeah, I love that. Can you share any more about what the strategy was, just sort of top level? Because I'm curious. I think a lot of people be curious, and a lot of the overwhelm of making that shift from videographer to video strategist can come with, well, what are the strategies? You're trying to think about all these things in advance, and you can fall into analysis paralysis. So, be interesting to know what was the strategy in this case.
As far as the campaign, or as far as the kind of sales process?
Yeah, I mean, more the campaign. What was the thing that led
Mm.
that bakery to have a line around the block versus if they hadn't done it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they what's lovely about them and who I like to work with a lot is people who have a strong mission or a strong story to tell. Because the bigger and stronger that mission is, the easier it is to make stories about it. So essentially so they are all about stone ground flour, getting the highest possible ingredients from local, ethically sourced farmers, um, building relationships with the community. Just a really cool mission. And so every week, I coached them to to film the videos themselves. I gave them scripts and shot lists so that they could film, and then we edited it for them. So we had a weekly running video that the people of Stroud, the bakery is called Leola, by the way. It's phenomenal. You have to check it out if you're in
I'll check
Western
it out.
England or Stroud. It's just unbelievable. So that helps. So first we started with a weekly video, and then we found they started doing some posting themselves, which did almost as well as what we were doing. And we learned that having their faces on camera, them having unscripted, just off the cuff videos actually worked really well. So husband and wife operation, the husband does one post a week, wife does another post a week, and then we have our professional video every week. So now they have 3 videos a week where people are getting to know Andy and Ruth. They're getting to see the construction going up. They're doing a lot of the construction themselves, whilst also testing recipes, whilst also highlighting their collaborators and the farmers they're working with. And so you get this really deep story and feeling of this exciting, delicious new project that's coming into town. We also specifically targeted people in Stroud with, we boosted every one post a week, just with £10. That's it. But what that resulted in, by the time they were opening, again, this is a business that has not opened yet, a local brick and mortar business. They had hundreds of thousands of views under their belt. So they got a line around the block, which
Love
is
it. Love it.
fantastic.
So so the overall strategy was actually pretty simple. It was 3 posts per week, 3 videos, of which 2 they were making, 1 you were making, and then a boost. And that was it. And that got the kind of results. And so I think the fundamental most important thing here is that you wouldn't have found that had you just followed a brief that they gave to you, which was like, hey, well, can you make us a video? Maybe you would have made just one video or whatever it was, but that wouldn't have got the kind of results that you got, which was from asking the right questions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
another thing you were saying was about being a business coach to people. It's interesting, like whether you call it a coach, a consultant, or as I call it, a strategist. The key thing is you do end up in that position where people are looking up to you because you're asking the right questions. I think I wouldn't put it in the bucket of being a business coach because you're more or less asking questions and then they're implementing. You're taking it another step further as a strategist, which is you're asking the right questions, understanding the problem, and then actually physically helping them implement the solution, whether that's like a done with you or done for you approach. But it makes the whole thing so much more enjoyable. It's much more exciting. There was a time in my business, maybe sort of 4 years in, where I nearly threw in the towel and gave up on the whole thing. And I'm so glad I didn't now. But at that point was when I had the turning moment of just realizing that actually this isn't about selling and telling. This is just about asking the right questions and ultimately helping people.
And another huge benefit about this process is, number one, you are whether the prospect goes with you or not, you are giving them massive value from the beginning. Just from that call, they're getting huge amount of clarity, and the call itself is hugely valuable. Even if they don't go with you today, they're very likely to go with you in the future when they try other solutions that don't work. The second part of it is, again, even if the prospect doesn't go with you, you have a full hour of deep conversation about your niche, which you can then, about pain points that people in your niche are suffering from, which you can then go out and apply to other proposals, other projects, other ideas. Like time and time again, I've learned that in hospitality and restaurant business and sustainable food that I'm part of, staffing, recruitment, retaining team members, attracting high quality team members is one of the number one challenges that people face. So that way, offering recruitment videos that becomes part of the process, and I've learned these through calls that I may not have even landed as clients, but it massively equips me for future conversations.
That's why the research and the niche part is so important, like we covered in the last episode. And also leads on to another piece I wanted to highlight is that sales isn't about you against them. It's about being on their side of the table. So when I'm in a conversation, I'm always imagining myself sat next to them, and it's you and them against the problem. So when it comes to being on their side of the table, you've got two routes. I mean, you can be you against them. You're asking why questions. You're asking classic salesy questions like, what's your budget? And you're also things like trying to get them to say yes 5 times. Yeah, that's an old classic sales technique versus the other end of the spectrum, which is you're just simply there to understand what's going on in their business. And we use things like, I'm curious, so tell me more about that. What's the biggest challenge for you at the moment? How's that impacting your business? Yeah, you see, you're just working with them to get a deeper understanding of the problem, which then positions you as someone who's there to help them rather than to try and empty their bank account.
I mean, I wonder also too if it's a version of push versus pull, right? Like I feel like in the past I was constantly pushing. I was like, I'm the best cinematographer. I've done all these wonderful things. I promise you I can achieve these results for you, even though I don't know what the problems are. Versus more of a pull, learning from them, what is your biggest challenge? What could really help you? What would really change your life right now? What are these things, and really understanding that depth of knowledge. Again, Dr. Frame, really diagnosing so you can really, really help.
Yeah. So this leads on to one of the other key things I wanted to highlight today is that one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when going through a discovery call is not going deep enough. And what I mean by that is a lot of people who start to step into this process, they might be asking some questions like, what's the biggest challenge in your business right now? But the conversation continues to stay pretty surface level. You're only really just asking top level questions. So, what's the biggest challenge? And it's like, okay, what are you doing currently to solve that? It's like, okay, what's that costing your business? All right. These are all good questions, but the difference between a okay sales call and a really powerful one is going deeper. So you might ask, what's the biggest challenge in your business right now? And they might say, well, I'm not getting enough sales. Instead of moving on, tell me more about that. When you say you're not getting enough sales, what do you mean specifically? And they might explain, well, we last year was much stronger. We were at, 4 sales a week and now we're at 2. Okay, interesting. So what's that costing your business? Yeah, same problem, but going deeper. How's that impacting you personally? Gotcha. How does that make you feel? And oftentimes these more emotional and personal questions, we can sometimes it feels like maybe there's not a place for those in a business context. But actually, it's a really important part of the big picture. You're working with humans, with business owners. These are people who are in the thick of it every single day, struggling with these challenges. So it's actually really important that you address the emotional component as well. It's not just a numbers game. For a lot of businesses, and take non-profits, for example, but this applies to all businesses, it might be about something else. It might be about impact. It might be about legacy. There are all these other pieces of the puzzle that we need to explore and go deeper into. Because if we just ask what's the biggest challenge in your business and we keep pushing through our question, pushing through the conversation, we're going to end up in a place where they don't feel like there's all that much of a problem there. You haven't explored all the different prongs, all the different doors that could be stepped into. And that's how I look at it when I'm going through a sales conversation, is that maybe there's 5 different doors in front of you. You've got to pick the right one. So going deep on one problem is far more powerful than going broad across a whole number of different problems during a conversation. And if you're faced with a few different problems, the best thing you can do is simply ask them. So you just mentioned that some of the things in your business right now, you're struggling with sales, conversions, the hiring process has been a real challenge as well. Across all these things, I'm curious, what's the most important for you right now? And which one, if solved, would move the needle for you the most? So we just want to put it back onto them. And a lot of this is about taking the weight off our shoulders, that feeling like we have to come up with a really clever response. And because the best conversations are just a series of very simple but very well calibrated questions.
That's a huge thing, that feeling, that desperation to sell, to tell them, always being on the back foot, versus all I need to do is ask a few questions. And it's amazing, that shift. I'm sure you've experienced this too, Jackson. Sometimes people at the beginning of the call, they're a bit grumpy and they're a bit stern. They just want you to do a thing. But then through these questions, you kind of see them relax. You kind of see them lighten up. You see them thinking about their business as a whole and kind of dreaming about the possibilities. And by the end of the conversation, I've often had people say, wow, thank you so much. Those are really good questions. That's really helped me think about, where to move next. And so it's a really satisfying experience.
I love hearing about some of your experiences. I know you just went to India recently. You talked about the bakery project. Like, are there any other sales conversations that you've had that have been particularly transformative, or maybe are very different to what you would have done years ago?
For sure. I'll talk briefly about a call I literally just got off, and then I'll talk about another project that was phenomenally awesome, that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So the call I just got off of, it was actually with a agency who usually my question would just be an advertising agency. The question would be, what's your budget? When do you need it? But because I was able to go deeper, I was really able to understand the project, understand the client, understand their needs, and actually give them tips to help the client, to help them get understanding, to deeper the understanding of the project from the client, which meant they could probably charge more money, that I could probably charge more, but most importantly, fix a genuinely challenging issue, which is how to hire good team members and how to keep them once they're hired. So that was incredibly satisfying. But then I can't go into much detail on the project, but I'll give you a quick case study from another project, which was called The Ocean and Us. They are a nonprofit organization that helps fight deep sea mining, to stop deep sea mining from destroying the ocean, essentially. And they came to me with saying, hey, I've got an idea for one video and do this one thing. And I said, okay, well, I learned about the biggest challenges, learn about the biggest problems. And the biggest thing they wanted to create was big impact. So we did a social media campaign. They went to Mexico, to the West Coast, where there is a huge drop off, to talk to fishermen and communities about the impact that deep sea mining would have on that community. We were able to hire a local crew over there to create a series of 12 social media videos that gained audience members over time. This helped them attract tens of thousands of petition signatures, and as well actually led to they hired us for a bigger project later, because they were going to go to the United Nations Ocean Conference, and they wanted a video to explain what they did and make real impact with key decision makers. So we created that project with them, and it went off fantastically, and they were able to connect with real people making real decisions about massive shifts that genuinely affect our climate as a planet. So that's phenomenal. And again, if I didn't really understand what the challenges were, really understand the buttons to push to get them to the solutions they wanted, none of that would have taken place.
Yeah, wow. And it just makes me think just how many amazing businesses there are out there and how many like unique and unusual and interesting problems there are to solve. And by taking this approach, you really unlock all that potential. Another big difference between, say, 10 years ago in business and now is that 10 years ago, I was only ever speaking to people who already could articulate their problems and knew that video was a potential solution. And so that put me in a position of always taking orders, always being like, okay, that's like let's call it the bottom 3 to 5% of the market, the people who are already problem aware, people who are already actively looking for video. By going through this process that we're talking about here, well, it just opens up the other 95% of the market. You can go and you can talk to pretty much any business in the world, and you can apply this process. You can use the Socratic approach and the doctor frame, and you can ask these questions, and you can unlock the value. You can unlock the challenges within this business that then puts you in a strong position to be able to come up with solutions. And yeah, your story there will just gets me so excited about like all the possibility of all these different businesses that you can be working with and all the different ways you can work with them.
But yeah, it's absolutely huge. And again, when it comes to budget, you can either charge a lot or a little, but when you really understand the core problem, you can allocate your resources properly. So again, this climate change group didn't have a huge budget, but I was still able to get the maximum results, while also my hourly rate was still very good, but still on a small budget. So again, it's just like the getting into the details is so important.
One other piece I think is worth bringing up, because you mentioned about awareness for this company. Well, I think like that's come up a couple of times. Oftentimes a business will come to us and they'll say, we want more awareness or we want more views. But the key responsibility for you as a strategist and applying the doctor frame, again, it's not to just focus on the surface level problem, the headache. We want to dig deeper and find out what the real thing is. What's the thing that's really holding their business back? So when someone comes to us and they say, we want more awareness, the question is always why. It's like, what is it behind that? What are you looking to do? So perhaps you're trying to drive more traffic to your landing page. Why do you want to do that? Maybe you want to get more conversions. Okay, you want to drive more sales. Okay, this impacts your bottom line. Most people stop there and it impacts your bottom line. But what does that then do for the business? What does it mean for the growth potential? What does that mean for you as an individual? We can keep on digging deeper until we get to the real root of the problem. And sometimes that might be like a legacy piece, for example. This is about getting my business to a certain level so that in 2 years I can retire and then I can hand it down to my children, or I can leave some sort of lasting legacy. And you'll know when you get to the real root of it. And that's the real challenge, and that's the fun part of going through the conversation. That's what you're really looking for. So yeah, avoiding just surface level conversations and being willing to ask the hard questions is what will help you stand out and ultimately unlock huge amounts of impact for the businesses you work with. In turn, you'll build great case studies, which in turn enables you to get more projects more easily and then grow your own business too.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Again, and this is really just a shift from constantly pitching and selling to asking a few questions. Essentially, it's quite a small shift with just a phenomenal change. So with that in mind, what are some tools that the listeners can kind of put in their back pocket for the next time they go on calls? Are there any tools or homework that we can give to some people?
Yeah, absolutely. So where do we start? First and foremost, always remember the doctor frame. So you're not there pitching and selling, you're there to ask questions. So one of the best things you can do, because it can be tricky to have a little bit of self-awareness in conversations sometimes, it can help to review all of your calls and then listen back to them afterwards and just look at how often was I speaking, how often was I asking questions, and how often were they talking. So that exercise can really help you reflect on whether or not you're going in the right direction with this. So 20/80 rule, very, very important. The other piece to this, a couple of really powerful questions that you can be using in these conversations is, first and foremost, asking them, what's the biggest challenge in your business right now? So that's the question that we lead with. So we build a little bit of rapport, we set the frame, and then we're asking that question. That's setting the tone. And then we want to be digging deeper. We want to be looking at, how is that challenge impacting the business? How's it impacting them? And how's it impacting people around them too? And you actually want to spend anywhere from like 20 to 40 minutes digging deeper into the core challenge. Sometimes there's 2 or 3, but typically there's one. Typically, you just want to focus on that one challenge, dig real deep. Another incredibly powerful question on the flip side, so you're addressing the challenges, you also want to be looking at where they want to get to. The most powerful question in all of sales when it comes to understanding their outcomes and their goals is to ask this. It's to say, if you and I were sat here again 12 months from now having another conversation, and it had been the best year on record for your business, what would have needed to have happened? So that immediately puts the prospect in a situation where they're visualizing a future where the problem has been solved, and they're visualizing it with you as well. But key thing is that they're going to give you a description of the end goal of where they want to get to. And all we then need to do is build a roadmap to get them from where they are now to where they want to be. And most people miss that simple piece of building up a clear, vivid description of where they want to get to. They just beat around the bush and they'll ask about different topics and they'll talk about solutions and deliverables. But really, when we boil it down, we're just looking to understand, where do they want to get to, using a powerful question like the one I just said. And then what's the bottleneck? What's the thing that's preventing them from getting there? And that's the first question. And then the more vivid detail we build up around these 2 points, the better position we're in to then be able to come up with a solution that's actually going to get them results.
And I think what's so lovely about that, kind of putting the vision into 12 months, is they're now psychologically connecting that solution with you. Since you're on the call, since you're asking these questions, since they're thinking about it, they're now connecting that beautiful result with the person that's right in front of them, which I think is incredibly powerful for the next call.
Exactly. And Will, anything on your end in terms of things that you found to be super powerful going into conversations? Anything that has been transformative, or just a little like nuggets that have changed the game for you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no. So I like to take 1,000 notes, record everything. I have 100 posters all over my wall, and I get very confused very quickly. So I really like to have very simple kind of mantras or phrases that I like to lean back on when I get lost. Biggest thing is doctor frame. Again, just imagine I'm a doctor. What would a doctor do? So that's number one. And then something I've recently written down is confidence, conviction, and clarity. If I'm confident that I can help these people, if I have strong conviction about my values and my beliefs, and I'm clear about exactly how I can help, the call is going to go so much better. So this is my new one that I'm employing, and it's been working great. Confidence, conviction, and clarity. I just have it on a Post-it. It helps me through.
Love it. Yeah. Clarity is the core of all of this. That's all we're looking to do. And like I mentioned earlier, imagine you're starting a conversation, you've got 100 drawers with question marks on them. You're just going through the conversation, opening each of those drawers and removing the question mark from the room. You're building up a clear picture of what's really going on. And when you have clarity on their situation, and then you're able to communicate that to them and they're clear on it as well, then that positions you as the expert, and it becomes very clear what next steps need to be taken in order to solve that problem and move forward. And again, the best sales conversations, everything flows very naturally. When you uncover the problem with clarity, the next question becomes, well, how do we solve it? Okay. So I think we covered a lot today, and I hope you enjoyed. And as always, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, drop them below. We'll read and get back to every single one of them, and also helps us inform what we'll cover next. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.